Good afternoon. I am Devika Madalli, the chair of this session. I would like to start by giving my respects to the traditional owners of the land that we stand on, and also my gratitude to WDS for giving me this opportunity to chair this session with really some great presentations. So, to the authors, the presenters, my apologies. The order of the presentation is this, not the one I communicated to you. And then the other announcement is that we go by this order. You can progress your slides yourself. It's linked to each of your names over here. With that, and then I request, we are a full house. All the presenters will be making the presentations. 7 of you are here physically with us. The 8th one is online, who is Gabriela Pino. So we are, all of you are going to make presentations. So in the interest of time, I request that we keep to 9 plus 1 minute. When it is 9 minutes, I'll show you this, because I don't have a 1 minute slide. So read this as 1 minute, and please don't read this as 2 minutes. And then when that is up, I'm going to show you this. And my timer has a nasty click at the end. It wants. So with that, I would not like to take too much of your time. The session is on policy and practice of data in research, data, society, ethics, and politics. The session aims to highlight the policies and practice of data with a focus on social aspects and ethical issues. So with that, I would like to invite Natasha.
Thanks, Devika. I was expecting another 60, 90 minutes later or something to get up with the change in order. I think I've had a bit too much coffee before now. Anyway, so I think, which one should I be using to move this forward? This one? Oh. Yes. Okay, great. So my short presentation is From Raids to Riches, how a local project ID got big global ideas. And I say local project ID because we'll be talking about RAID, which is the Research Activity Identifier. So who has heard of RAID in the room? Oh, that is awesome. Great. Okay. Well, I hope that you'll learn something new from the presentation. But this presentation, the reason it's local project ID to global ideas is because the little RAID as an idea actually originated at the project ID stemmed from a project that was an Australian project, and now it is an ISO standard and it is scaling internationally. So my co-presenters on this, or they're not presenting, I'm presenting on behalf of all the speakers today, is Christine Kirkpatrick from the San Diego Supercomputer Centre, and Clifford Tatum from SURF in the Netherlands, and Joy Owango from the Africa PID Alliance. So that's a really good collaboration there and an indication of the reach that RAID has. What is RAID? It's an ISO standard. It came out in 2022, and that standard defines a persistent identifier for research projects and activities. So when you think of PIDs, just think of ORCIDs, DOIs, things like that. I think this data community is really well versed in persistent identifiers. So it's also it's an identifier that uniquely identifies research projects. I'll just clarify there that a project is not a grant. So a grant is something you get, and the project is something you do after you get the grant. So grant has a really fixed amount of metadata associated with it, like the chief investigator, who's funding it, the amount of funding, the time frame, and a project is not quite so set. So just like a shopping list, when you go out and do your project, things change. Different things end up in your shopping basket, different things end up during the course of a project. And what RAID does is it captures those activities and the things linked to that project. So the data and the outputs of research as well as the researchers involved in that. So it's also a whole system that provides that service. And as I said, it started from an Australian project that's now expanding. So if you think about these other identifiers that you're all familiar with, we have ORCID for people and researchers. Who here has an ORCID? Probably most people in the room have it or know what that is about, to identify researchers and link them to their research works. There's the RAW, which is for organisations and institutions. There's a DOI for research outputs, equipments, grants, etc. And IGSN is another example for physical samples and specimens. So there's something missing in that. And it's actually the RAID. It's the project identifier, the thing that groups all those other things together so that funders, for example, can track. I invested in this project. I gave this person this grant. They did the project. What were the outputs of that project? And the important part for that is you can nest projects, so you can relate one project to another project, and you can store the grants in there, and that's really important for tracking things over a longer period of time, because research doesn't always have impact in the amount of time, like the first 12 or 18 months that generally a funder asks for. And it's really useful for researchers to be able to keep track. Have you ever inherited somebody else's project? Well, you want to know where all the stuff is and what they've been working on, and how that all comes together, and RAID can help with that. So here are some of the RAID global partnerships. So the ARDC is the ISO-appointed global registration authority for RAID. And in our role in that, we work with a number of partners who are becoming registration agencies for RAID to offer RAID in their region or in their country. So my colleagues here from SURF in the Netherlands have been working hard to set up a RAID service there. We have partnered with, and also to ARDC and SURF have been involved in a European Open Science Cloud project called FairCall for EOSC, and that part of that project was about incorporating RAID into the European Open Science Cloud. The Africa PID Alliance is looking at how to incorporate it into their doc ID system, and Lyrasis and the San Diego Supercomputer Center are our US partners, and of course DataCite is a really fundamental and founding partner for us, providing, I think the analogy I heard from Matt Byes today is the train tracks for RAID, so the underlying infrastructure for the identifier, and the rest of the RAID system is built over the top of that. The train and the conductors, etc. So here's a little look at what SURF are doing. As I mentioned, the incorporating RAID into the European Open Science Cloud, but also looking to offer RAID to members of SURF. So I think there's, 60 plus organisations looking to use RAID in the Netherlands, and so rolling out that service across the Netherlands, and then offering a service to other organisations interested in minting RAIDs in Europe, so playing a really critical role there. And part of that EOS project was putting RAID into that PID graph, where you can query something that shows you who is a which researchers are connected to which grants, to which articles, etc. The US RAID pilot has been funded by the National Science Foundation. I kind of want to hear a cheer to that, because wow, in this day and age, isn't it amazing that they actually got the funding? It's real funding, it's happening. And so they are piloting RAID in the US, so that's congratulations to the San Diego Supercomputer Center. And Lyrasis, and they have so far captured a lot of use cases from their partners, and looking at how to use RAID there. Those use cases are available online. If you want to see why they're using it and what they're trying to do with RAID, you can have a look at that. But they are close to setting up their production service there, and that's very exciting. The Africa PID Alliance, as I mentioned, they have a system called the Doc ID that groups a number of identifiers, and RAID is the missing component for their project identifiers there. And they want to investigate ways in which RAID can help record the provenance of Indigenous knowledge in research contexts as well. So that's another different angle, an important angle for RAID to take. We also have some vendor integrations as well. So MyLaminin is a project in the research space from Canada, and they have integrated RAID into their system. Also, Redbox is an Australian sort of data management plan type system for managing your data and recording that, and that RAID is integrated into that so that the universities who use that service can then have access to minting RAIDs. It's also integrated with ORCID, which is a really nice thing, so that you can have RAID on your ORCID records. And we're also integrating RAID with RSpace as well. And Rory McNeil, who some of you might know, is at the conference representing some of the work that they're doing in RSpace as well. Okay, so that's the end of my slide. These are people that you can talk to here at International Data Week. So I just thought I'd put the photos up so that, because it's hard to read people's badges. But yeah, just to go and talk to any of these people. Joy has joined us virtually from Africa, but everyone else is here in person. And I'll particularly shout out to Matthias Liffers, who is the product manager for RAID and driving a lot of that work and doing such a great job on integrating RAID with these other systems and supporting our partners. So I hope you got something out of the presentation and you know where to go for follow-up. So thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. I missed saying this. We'll have the questions right at the end after the 8 presentations. So the next speaker, please.
How do I do it? It should be here on the computer.
Go back.
Okay. Amazing. All right. This one? No? This one. Thank you. So, hello everybody. Good afternoon from my side also. A pleasure to be here and see Australia for the first time. I am going to talk about our national policy work on open research data and methods in Finland, so that this could maybe inspire some of the policy discussions here. So I have been working with open data science and responsible research practices for a longer time. I'm a professor in data science at the University of Turku, Department of Computing, and I am dealing a lot with methods, data science methods in the research. And I think this is an area that is often neglected. When we talk about research data, we should also think about the methods, because these are intertwined in so many ways. So the policy work that I'm going to discuss relates to the national coordination for open science and research in Finland. So we have basically national coordination by the Federation of Finnish Learned Societies that is preparing different policies on open science, including data and methods. And I was recently leading a working group that developed this research methods policy. So I will give a very brief overview of those things, and just as the first thing to get started, let's have a brief look at the usual scientific process. So if we think about scientific process, it has these elements. So we have some kind of observation. Even if you do qualitative research, you have observations or insights into some phenomena. And then we have method. In data science, it is often algorithms. It could be something else. And then we have communication, either to our peers or for the general public. And these elements usually form an iterative cycle. So we make observations, then we interpret the observations and make inferences, and we communicate this, and we learn more about the system, and the scientific process goes forward. But this really is indeed an iterative process. We need infrastructures, data science infrastructures, to manage the data and to manage the methods, and this is actually where the data and methods come together. Now, the transparency and reproducibility have become challenges compared to the traditional ways of doing science. I mean, we have hundreds of years of experience on working on this cycle, but basically what has been the motivation for the open science movement is that many of these things have become more challenging with the digitalization and more massive amounts of data and complexity of the algorithms. So how to make this more transparent and reproducible is the question. And of course there is a lot of different aspects that relate to this, starting from the fact that this is usually really complete life cycle of research that we have to think about. We have to think from the very initial stages of the process to the final publishing stage and even after that, and how to make the whole process more transparent. And then of course there can be long-term maintenance, which is also something that is not traditionally taught in research so much. So what happens after the formal publication? How can we maintain the resources and so forth? And maybe finally the culture that surrounds this. So what is the culture of sharing? What we are used to and what we are supposed to do. And this cannot be ignored, and this relates a lot to the resources that are available for doing these things, opening the resources. And one final thing I want to mention is the maturity level. So we cannot really require the same level of maturity for all the outputs. So it's completely different thing to share the raw source code or some initial data snippets compared to finalized, well-documented software that anybody can use or datasets that are well finalized. Okay, so there are many different aspects of this. And this is important, of course, because there have been all the challenges in reproducibility. We don't have to go very deeply into this. This is just one example about economics paper where they gave the same data set and the same problem set up for a lot of different researchers. And then, of course, essentially none of the researchers or analysts was able to find the same conclusions based on the same data set. They found even conflicting effect sizes for certain things and huge variability in the outcomes. This is not a problem as such, I think. It is natural that we can reach different conclusions from the same data even. What is more important is that we can be very transparent how this inference process works. How did we reach certain conclusions? And that's why we have to emphasize the openness and transparency of the research methods, because research methods are interpretation of the data, and we have to be sure that we transparently communicate how we do that, because otherwise we can get so different results. And then, of course, this opens the way to discuss the choices, and maybe some of the inferences are better than others, so we can continue the debate. So in the national policy for open science, and especially for open research methods, we have been thinking about the openness of the methods and infrastructures. This is combined with the similar policy on data, and this actually it's like two-part publication where we have one part for the data and one part for the methods. It's avointiede.fi is the website where you can find also English version of this. If you're interested, we have not seen similar methods policy work in other countries that much. So if you are interested or if you are working on something similar in your own country, we are interested to hear about this. So this is a policy where we were reading a lot of background material from similar European regulatory space, and then trying to adapt it to the Finnish case. And we were thinking research methods broadly, qualitative, quantitative, different types of methods. Now, research methods themselves are not end goal as such. So why we are talking about the openness of research methods, we basically distilled this into these two different aspects. So we have to think about the quality of research and impact of research. These are the two key aspects that motivate the openness of the methods. And as researchers or data users, we are responsible for providing high quality research and high impact research. When we had this policy on a commenting round, we were mainly focusing on the quality of research. But then some of the funders correctly noted that the impact of research is essentially equally important. But of course, there can be many, many different ways to measure impact and what we mean by that. There is some listing of different keywords here. So of course, we can debate what we mean by that. Quality of research also covers a lot of different things. But quality and impact are the two key motivations for opening. Openness as such is not necessarily intrinsic value. And then the structure of the national policy work is like this. So we basically have a national declaration on open science and research. And then that comes together with a couple of different policies on publications, data methods, and so forth. And then there is more specific recommendations for this. As part of the work, we had to deal with a lot of different methods. So methods vary from quantitative to qualitative research, theoretical to experimental research. So, of course, this is a vast space and not necessarily the same definitions of the openness or transparency apply to all of these, but maybe they have some commonalities. We think more about that in the policy, so you can have a look at that for details. And ultimately, the national policy is then condensed into a couple of different concrete actions and objectives that you can see here summarized. Okay, I think my time is over. Just the final slide is, I like this quote that basically tells about the separation of the alchemy from the modern scientific system some hundreds of years ago. And it has been said that the open communication of research was a key to separate science from alchemy. So what marks out modern science is the ability to form communities of critical examiners that can critically assess the results and communicate how to do it better. And open methods is a key part of this. Thank you.
Olga.
Yeah, thank you very much, Devika. Good afternoon, everyone. From my side, I'm a data steward with a scientific background in environmental sciences, supporting researchers in medicine and veterinary medicine, in research data management at the University of Bern, so that now we are moving to the Swiss Alps in Switzerland from Finland. And today I would like to give you a brief overview, prepared jointly with my colleagues, Christina Krebs and Dirk Verdicho, on strategies working with and on sensitive data, and provide you an overview at the University of Bern level and also at the national level. I will touch the topic that currently in discussion among different stakeholders, diverse stakeholders, and also networks in Switzerland, and also at the national and international level. In 2020, the State Secretariat for Education, Research and Innovation commissioned Swiss universities to develop a Swiss national open research data strategy, so that for open research data strategy and action plan to also develop a strategy council with leadership for decision making and open research data strategy. And this strategy is focused on the research and research community as a whole, so that with central role of researchers, that research data should be open as possible, however, respecting of disciplinary approaches and respecting discipline diversity, interoperable, internationally networked, and sustainably financed. The topic of sensitive and personal data is highly relevant for many research data management support networks, and here I would like to give example of Swiss Research Data Support Network, SRDCN, which aims to facilitate know-how and knowledge exchange among different research data professionals and among different disciplines, from diverse disciplines. And also recently, a sensitive personal data node has been launched that brings together research data professionals from different disciplines, touching the topic of sensitive and personal data, where we discuss also different research data strategies, policies, recommendations at the national level in Switzerland. However, in Switzerland, there is also, we have 26 cantons and it's different regulations and fragmented understanding of legal requirements and lack of national strategy in terms of governing sensitive data. This, with Swiss personalized health network, which enable to responsible use of sensitive data, this lack of knowledge can be fulfilled, and we as data stewards and research data professionals from Swiss Research Data Support Network also working together with Swiss Personalized Health Network, for example, in working group for data governance, where we're also discussing and approaches for harmonizing governance and frameworks for data access enable more adequate support for researchers, not only development of policies, but also how to guide researchers and help researchers in these approaches. Another network which I would like to highlight at Research Data Alliance is more sensitive data interest group, so that I learned about this group in 2023 in Salzburg during the also International Data Week conference, so that which also support and set community standards and best practice to optimize work with and on sensitive data. Here I would like to emphasize the role of the Swiss open research data at the University of Bern level. We have University of Bern policy and strategies towards 2030, for example, where we jointly with other research units and support units developing data governance for researchers, taking into consideration legal basis and principles, roles and responsibilities, and infrastructure costs. As well as recommendation and guidelines highly important in ethics, and we are recently developing ethics recommendation in research data management, which also consolidate sensitive data governance and structure with fair care and different basic principles that are highly important also for researchers, especially who are using artificial intelligence, and to gather sensitive data and how to work on and with sensitive data. Here I would like to emphasize data stewards who are recently employed as a research support in collaboration with different support units. And the role of a common topic in sensitive data across different disciplines. At the University of Bern, we have 8 faculties, and we selected 5 main pillars with a common topic of sensitive data and data science. For example, one of the data stewards, Federica, is here, so that if you have questions with regard to data science, he is around, and with regard to the sensitive data, so that I'm responsible across the many disciplines along with my colleagues. And to facilitate data governance at the University of Bern, we're developing specific guidelines. In definition also, what we find important is to be on the same page with researchers to understand what we are talking about, so that to provide definition for sensitive data and for data which should be treated carefully. To support researchers, we provide data classification in 3 clusters, so that it's more straightforward when researchers working with non-sensitive data. However, they should also take into consideration different principles and ethics commissions, research councils, which should be also considered carefully. Personal data, sensitive personal data, where specific measures are applied and also strictly regulated by law. Here I would like to give you an example of common topic of sensitive data, how it works in ethics and artificial intelligence. We know that in dynamic world, it's more and more researchers applying artificial intelligence, and it should be taken seriously at the beginning, like ethics by design, and across all disciplines, how this question can be relevant. For example, for human sciences and medicine, if you take as a climate scientist, so that for me it's highly relevant how climate impact on environmental society, on human and animal, so that, for example, with increasing drought, stress or heat waves, how it impacts of different populations. And here it's common topic also applied for different disciplines, because researchers also apply different interviews with land users, its impact agriculture, and all of these disciplines is also merged and related to personal data, which should be also treated carefully, or impact of climate change on health and disease, so that it also should be taken into consideration where sensitive data and confidential information can be used. Our approach for data sharing and sensitive data sharing and data publication provided here, so that we can see that how sensitive personal data and health-related data can be published. It's easy and more clearly for anonymized data. However, we know that anonymization is also not fully possible, or it's hardly possible to do, but it's open access and embargoed access can be provided with clear licensing, with CC BY, for example. But it can be also rare cases for rare diseases where anonymization is not possible. In this case, we also recommend restricted data access with uploading data transfer and use agreement. And in case of pseudonymized data or synthetic data, open restricted access can be applied. And for raw data, a priori, we know that it's hardly possible to share or publish data, but in some cases, if we have informed consent and patients would like to report about their disease, and within the European projects or national projects, they can also do this with consultation legal service office. And to outlook, I would like to highlight that data stewards are becoming more important contact person in the university environment, and sensitive data is a common topic across discipline, where support researchers with guidelines, checklists, and building community among researchers and selecting data champions to emphasize empowering scientific community, enhance collaboration with national, international level, and also providing training sessions and workshops. I would like to thank my co-authors and for Andrea for inspiring discussion. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take questions and also follow-up discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. So Soledad Quinos, I don't know how to pronounce, sorry, could not be with us, but Rodrigo Roa, the co-author, is here. So it's all yours.
Hello, everyone. It's okay. Yeah. Well, I'll be talking about towards a fair data policy in Chile. I'm Rodrigo Roa. I'm the executive director of a national Chilean institution called Data Observatory. The mission of this institution is to acquire, process, analyze, and make available large-scale data sets. So one of the... one of the things that we first it's needed to say about Chile and about Data Observatory is that Chile has become a living laboratory where data flows seamlessly across different ecosystems, from skies of astronomy to the depths of the ocean. And the National Data Centers Plan in 2024 is evolving to the backbone for the transformation, expanding the country's capacity to secure, interoperable, and data storage. Through the national AI policy back in 2021, Chile recognized the fair data that is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, must be the ethical foundation for artificial intelligence. Meanwhile, open science and open data initiatives led by the Ministry of Science and our NSF kind of institution, it's called the National Agency for Research and Development, promote transparency, collaboration, and data reuse across disciplines. At the heart of the ecosystem stands the Data Observatory, it's a public-private academic alliance turning fragmented, isolated datasets into shared, open platforms that power research, innovation, and responsible AI development. Chile is building its data future through collaboration. Led by Data Observatory, the first strategy brings together universities, government, and industry to create a shared vision about national data governance. It serves as a roadmap, aligning infrastructure standards and cultures to make data truly findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Through this effort, Chile connects local action with global open data movements, positioning the country as a regional reference for responsible data stewardship. Well, I will talk about the key components of the strategy. At the core of the Chile's first strategy lies a simple idea. Governance, technology, people, and policy must evolve together. It starts with governance and coordination through a national fair network that connects institutions and aligned practices. Then comes infrastructure, interoperable repositories, shared metadata, and persistent identifiers that make data flow. Capacity building ensures people are ready, training data stewards, researchers, and policymakers to act with purpose. And finally, policy and finance anchor it all, creating regulatory frameworks and sustainable funding to keep the ecosystem alive. And cultural change and recognition about this strategy is key, is because no strategy works without a shift in culture. And it's the outcome maybe of this implementation of this strategy. Because academic systems must evolve to value open science, recognizing collaboration, not just a publication. We need incentives for data stewardships and sharing, making openness a part of a professional success. And trust and transparency and ethics become everyday practices and with no slogans. Because in the end, FAIR is both technical and a cultural transformation. We have several pilot projects and case studies, and the first strategy isn't just a theory. It's being tested and in the field through several projects, governmental related, like the INES and Abierta ones. Nearly half of Chile's universities have adopted open science practices and FAIR principles. The Data Observatory extends the work across domains, from astronomy and ocean data, environmental and social platforms. These pilots reveal what works, feasibility, real challenges, and new opportunities for scaling FAIR implementation worldwide. Regional and global alignment. Chile's FAIR journey is a part of a bigger story. It connects directly with the Go FAIR International initiative, ensuring global standards meet local needs. There is growing momentum for Chile to host a national FAIR office, anchoring regional coordination through projects like Latam GPT, who's a large language model that it's be trained and pre-trained with Spanish and with Portuguese and English, incorporating or integrating our regional culture. And we are shaping the shared Latin America and data and AI identity. One of our values is collaboration, trust, and sovereignty. I'm short-sighted, that's why I need to read here. So. Well, the expected impact is that the first strategy, it's already changing how Chile thinks about data. We expect better data quality and reusability, creating real value across science and policy. It will strengthen collaboration, connecting disciplines, institutions, and sectors that rarely interact. Chile positions itself as a regional leader in data governance, offering a replicable model for Global South, proof that openness and strategy can drive shared progress. And I don't know if I have much time. I'm doing okay? Yeah, okay. Well, new governance structures. This is it's happening right now at the moment. The first strategy is shaping the new forms of collaboration. We formed the new CODATA National Committee. It's the first one in Latin America. And now it's connecting global data practices with national priorities, bringing together academia, government, and civil society. In parallel, we developed an alliance regarding universities, companies, industry, private and public sector, and NGOs in order to teach how these principles, fair principles, and how open data it's needed not only in the scientific area, it's of course needed in the public sector, and how to implement infrastructures in those areas. So just to finish in, this is my last slide. In summary, the first tragedy, it's more than a policy, it's a national opportunity that builds a new rethinking of how Chile produces and shares knowledge. It demands political will, institutional commitment, and collaboration across every sector. If we sustain that momentum, Chile can lead Latin America towards an open, responsible, and truly impactful data ecosystem. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm a bit of an outlier today. So I'm a former public servant who was a wannabe academic who started a software company that sold metadata solutions. One of the first things that I learned when I did that was it wasn't the challenge of selling metadata software, it was actually the challenge of selling metadata as a general principle to people. So I'm not here to talk about any particular piece of software, I'm here to talk about research that we've done internally about breaking those barriers down. A big part of that is around how we communicate what we do as an institution, what we do as a community to people outside of our area. We have a lot of tools that tell us what data has to be. We have a lot of tools that tell us what we need to have, but we don't tell people what they have to do. We don't actually communicate very well what we expect users to do across our networks, across our organizations. This is what we've attempted to change with what we call the MAST methodology. I'm not going to step through all of this, but it is in front of you, and I'm going to be doing a breakout session tomorrow morning on the post-it note out there. But basically it looks at what we've taken from the Agile Manifesto, which is the idea of the MAST Manifesto. 4 very common beliefs that we probably already in this room believe. Metadata is important, people need to be involved in this process, we need to move towards standards adoption, and everybody has to be involved. A very clean acronym designed to communicate to everybody across the organization why this is important. Because if we don't believe that this is important, people won't actually institute change, which means any tooling we bring in won't actually affect anything. The other thing that we've identified is 5 highly common activities across every data management or data governance program, looking at what people actually need to do across our organizations. High-level inventories, deep data documentation, endorsement processes, auditing to develop a single source of truth, and leadership. Not all of these stages need to be run concurrently, and not necessarily all of them need to be run in any individual program. The design of the MAST methodology is really around communications, really around a communications toolkit. It's standards and technology agnostic, and is designed to help us talk about what we do, not necessarily how we do it or what tools are required. We've also released this as a Creative Commons toolkit because we see that this is a really important way for us to break down those barriers. An important part of my journey was I crossed the barrier to do an MBA to understand how we speak to executives. And it's through frameworks like this and common frameworks like this that it becomes a powerful way for us to talk quickly and cleanly around what we do. We've also been developing a lot of training material that I'll talk about soon, and have developed a growing practice of around 250 practitioners who've gone through this program to talk about these common stages that we can use to break down these problems. in practice, we've seen through very short, sharp sessions, people are able to pick this up and adopt this language to their own organisations quite quickly. They're able to take our material and actually start to enact change and communicate to people what they needed to do, and more importantly, what they didn't have to do at each individual stage. One thing that we'll be publishing later this year is what we call a common data governance rollout plan. What we look at here is 3 components of those activities. We conduct an inventory, a very quick, short, sharp, 20 attribute data collection where we get information across the entire organisation and say, what data do you hold? We develop a short endorsement body that's designed to say why that's important, what they look for in each individual field, and who's going to be responsible for publishing this. And then we take that to their leadership group and talk about how this connects to key outcomes, how we can demonstrate the linkages between data and performance indicators, and show progress. These sound like simple steps, and probably quite common steps. However, by constructing it within a framework, we develop buy-in. What we achieve through this, and what we've seen this achieved through repeatable processes, is we develop a searchable data asset register. Granted, most of the time it's in a spreadsheet, but it shows the organisation why metadata in some capacity is useful. Without introducing large standards, without introducing technology, we can demonstrate why metadata is powerful from a search and discovery perspective. Businesses ask for governance. And I'm going to repeat that. People ask me to build more governance in their organisations. Once we show them why this is important we start to see questions around security of information or topics of Indigenous data sovereignty where people ask, how do we govern that? We don't have to sell governance, we have people asking us to bring policies to them. And executives knew that more was coming. What I've told to you is we did a very simple spreadsheet activity and told people what was in it. What we told to the executives was that we had a 5-stage process where certain things were out of scope. We weren't going to build data dictionaries. We weren't trying to bring in expensive technologies, and we weren't going to be developing a single source of truth because those are big, hard topics. However, we could point to parts of the acronym and say, these are activities we're going to do eventually. But what we're going to do through this phase, through this repeatable process, is we're going to develop a data inventory that's useful. We're going to put something in front of you and your users that they can use to find information. We achieve quick wins and drive adoption for the program. From this, we've started to develop our own maturity assessment. And I can say to you with confidence that if 80% of people in an organisation say it's hard to find data for their role, no framework, no other assessment is going to change my mind that that's an organisation that needs to change. What we've developed against each of those 9 attributes is 2 simple questions that start with things like, can you find data for your role? We ask the entire organisation and say, are you getting the outcomes that you desire from data? Do you know what your data means? Do you know who's responsible for talking about things? The purpose of this is to get aggregate information from everybody. I can't tell you what you think of this talk, only you can tell me. Hands up, who's enjoying the talk? Great, okay. In aggregate, that one single question has told me a lot about how this is being received. I can't really judge how the room's feeling, but we do that in data maturity all the time. So we take very simple questions and we get a very quick snapshot, very quick feedback about how this operates. And this is highly different to what we see in the industry today. I did actually review the FAIR data maturity model. It wasn't in some updated slides I did at 8 o'clock this morning, so that's on me. But what we've done is made a very simple self-assessment tool where we can get the entire organisation to tell us what they think they're doing around data rather than us trying to assess them. We get their perceptions and their beliefs, so we get as much broad coverage as we can to aggregate that into some large numbers. What this looks like is we developed, so this is available, freely available as part of our Creative Commons toolkits, toolkit.MAST methodology. What it is it's a quick tool that we can use with a 2-minute setup. Any institution who's interested in starting to assess through this program can pop in some details and launch a survey in minutes. Under 10 minutes response time for every user, so when we bulk send it out, we can get responses really, really quickly. The important thing is we've also built in the capability for us to break it down by business area or business function. If we're looking at different faculties or different business units, we can actually get information down at that granular level And as you can see in this anonymized version, we can see where particular teams are having faults with, are they not introducing standards? Do they not understand that metadata is useful? Do they not have any endorsement processes so we can start to develop an action plan to target areas specifically? The other thing that's really important, as somebody who has now become a senior executive, is we have prepackaged dashboards, and dare I say, a lovely radar plot that's really focused on our chief executives and C-suite officers to show them what's wrong. People aren't finding data. Is that a problem for you? Probably. So we can give them a prepackaged dashboard that shows them exactly what's there. Yeah, cool. I'm out of time. I rushed through that quite quickly. I'm keeping us on time, people. So the purpose here is, like, just to kind of sum it up, is this is a Creative Commons toolkit. This isn't about a particular piece of technology. This is about a particular gap in the knowledge within our industry about how we communicate to others outside the room. And as somebody who does a lot of communication outside the room, selling metadata is quite hard. And this has been a really critical way of us breaking that down to understand how we can communicate with users to change their behaviours. What we've identified is that whilst standards are powerful and whilst technology is useful, behavioural change is most critical, and getting users to write stuff down early is really important. And that's one of the critical things that we focus on, is making it easier for people to use. And we are making a lot of this stuff open source and Creative Commons. So we do have a landing page up, and we've started to put more material out there. We're actually going to be putting up some implementation guides and a handbook later this year. And we're taking all of our existing in-person training and converting it to be online so that we can start to expand that reach. And as more members of the community come on board, or as more people like yourselves use it, we're actually building toolkits to talk about this from a tool or standards agnostic way. So how can we build specific guidelines for different standards or different communities is really important as well. The key thing I would say is if you're identifying a similar gap, or if you're one of those people who is nodding along, the reason that we've put a lot of effort behind this is because we need to build these acronyms to really communicate to people within our community. I think it's a really cool addition to the knowledge base to sit along things like FAIR and Dharma to communicate change. And if you're interested, please try out our toolkit or visit MAST. And if you didn't get one of the handouts, we've got some spares as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Samuel. Kelsey Badger.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelsey Badger. I am an assistant professor and data librarian at The Ohio State University. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how we might think as academics about transitioning from data management training only within our institutions and among our research communities to sharing that knowledge out with some of the community-based organizations that we may be collaborating with as researchers. I want to acknowledge as well the major contributions to this work from my colleague Larissa Fenner-Lux, who is not able to be with me here today, and as well to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we present. So really, this presentation is intended to be a call to action. I'll speak a little bit about a case study and what I'm doing within my own corner, but I am hoping that anyone who hears this presentation today might also be thinking about how it could apply within their own contexts. So my call to action is that I believe that researchers who are working with administrative data, so that is any data that was not originally produced for research purposes, usually by another community-based organization, but nonetheless has research value, can support those community partners by re-envisioning preparatory data work as an opportunity to identify gaps and provide resources for capacity building. So as I mentioned, I have a bit of a case study for this about work that I'm doing with my colleague Larissa at the Erickson Institute DCFS Early Childhood Project. So first, just a little bit of background about the context for my case study. Erickson Institute has operated under a state-level government contract in the United States with the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services for over 25 years. So long-standing data organization, or not data organization, long-standing community-based organization that produces a lot of data. They currently have over 45 clinical and administrative staff who collect developmental assessment and service linkage data for thousands of young children who have experienced abuse or neglect. So they have decades of data on tens of thousands of very vulnerable families. This data provides a very unique source of historical information on a priority population, but they have had next to no support in their management or organization of it, whether from their fiscal sponsor at the state level or any of their myriad research partners over decades. So we are a project funded by a consortium in the United States called the PIT-UN. This is the Public Interest Technology University Network. And that study had 3 major outcomes. I'm going to be focusing primarily on this third one, the data capacity building. But the other outcomes that we were aiming for with this study was to first curate the early childhood projects data, so to produce something that was more analysis ready for them, not immediately to make publicly available, but just to return to them as a valuable asset for them to manage. To produce a playbook for those administrative data curation activities that we would undertake to make that data analysis ready, helping to elucidate and provide credibility for that sort of preparatory data work that is often undervalued in academia. And then again, finally, we'll focus in on this data capacity building for the rest of the presentation. So our capacity building process has 2 different sources of ground truth information about how we might approach these curatorial data preparatory actions as education. So one of those is the curation itself, which that is ground truth about these specific data practices within the organization, right? When you work with an organization's data, if there are things that you are doing to remediate it, you learn a little bit something about what the challenges are with working with the data. But it's also equally important to understand why those practices came into existence, right? No one is intentionally mismanaging, misorganizing information. They're working within a particular context that has constraints and difficulties. So it's also important to actually speak with people and understand how practices came into being. So we did both of these. Before I want to go a little bit deeper into what we learned from the data curation practice, level set with a definition of data curation. I know this can mean a number of different things, even in a community that is more well-versed with this concept than some others may be. So broadly, I will use this definition from the ICPSR data repository, that data curation is akin to work performed by an art or museum curator. Through the curation process, data are organized, described, cleaned, enhanced, and preserved for public use, much like the work done on paintings or rare books, to make the works accessible to the public now and in the future. So this is a very large umbrella of activities. We're basically talking about any activity that may help to prepare data for future use. So what do you learn through data curation about the challenges to managing data within an organization? Many things. But here's one list of some of the items that we learned within this case study about challenges that this project was experiencing with their data. 1, basic file management, things like inconsistent or uninformative file names. Deeply nested file directories that were difficult to navigate, even by the users who had created them. Duplicative files and version control concerns where it was difficult to understand what was the most up-to-date or version of record within the data. Because this organization is primarily working within Microsoft Excel, again, lack of data management and infrastructure support over time, there are also issues around kind of general spreadsheet hygiene, we might call it. So this includes using formatting, things like colors or highlighting or bolding to convey info, or otherwise just to make data pretty or readable by humans, but not necessarily by machines. Combining values in cells, inconsistent use of data types, and uncontrolled categorical values. But equally importantly, and we heard about this some in the last presentation, there are also kind of workflow or social and cultural challenges. So things like lack of documentation, variation across individuals or teams, as well as over time, and manual processes for data entry and aggregation that introduce quality assurance issues. There are, however, many well-known answers to each of these problems within the research data management community. So each of these challenges that we just looked at have accompanying potential solutions. File management introduces ideas like file naming worksheets, card sorting exercises for directory organization. Spreadsheet hygiene can include things like education around Excel features for validation and assigning data types, as well as numerous other resources on tidy data that have been developed throughout the academic community. There are also plenty of resources around workflows, things like documentation templates, checklists for onboarding and offboarding procedures, and cross-training among team members. However, it's all well and good to say, well, we've developed resources for some of these things, we'll just send them to you. But the approach matters. So reminding you again, we did interviews with this project as well. We actually formed the team into 6 different focus groups based around their job roles. And this is a direct quote from one of those interviews talking about their experience working with a previous research partner who said, "It has taken some time with partner. We had mass pressure with them. And the first response from them was to create a how I have not met expectations PowerPoint and deliver it back to me." So I want to clarify here that when we talk about approaching community-based organization partners to offer resources, that the emphasis needs to be on resources. This likely will have the byproduct of making work and research with community-based organizations easier. However, that's not the first and foremost goal. This is a value add. This is a way of working responsibly and respectfully with community-based organizations, not what we have within this project come to refer to as data-splaining. So building solutions together. This is a picture actually, and a little bit of a pun on the word building solutions. They're using Legos here from one of our capacity building workshops, building on the Lego Serious Play model. A couple of recommendations in this area of building solutions together. First, it's important to include culture building activities, so not just these kind of technical data management recommendations from a couple of slides back, but also activities that help underscore the value of these practices, the value of data within the organization, and importantly, that also help all of the voices across an organization to be heard. So one thing that also came out of these focus group interviews were dramatic differences across different functional job roles in their experiences working with data, as well as differences in level of support within different supervisory structures. So second, also recommend starting with small recommendations. So we, of course, cannot, most of us, from our positions within our institutions, create wholesale data infrastructure for every organization we ever partner with. But there are small, realistic recommendations around these topics of, again, things like file management, workflow suggestions, capacity building, that are not new technologies or systems, and that are also more realistic from a cost of change perspective when working with organizations that are often under-resourced. And lastly, there are existing resources for data management. This can seem like a big ask to attach a new practice onto a research project, but this does not mean creating entirely new educational resources so much as helping shine a light on resources that have already been developed within the academic research community that might be able to be shared more broadly. To wrap up, I want to talk about a couple of the next steps I am planning to take to scale this beyond this first case study project to hopefully something that has more reach and is a little bit more scalable. So first, I am working to coordinate with instructors within my institution that teach project-based learning classes that partner with community organizations to see how we might view this as both education with current students on data management that they might subsequently share within community-based research contexts. I'm also hoping to leverage partnership with the University Office for Engaged Scholarship that we are fortunate to have at my institution in order to reach interested research teams to help explore this model a little bit more widely. And I have also, within my consortium with the Public Interest Technology University Network, begun conversations about how we might explore this model at even greater scale through cross-university partnership. However, as I said, this is a call to action, and I am hoping that this incited some ideas in each of you, and I would love to discuss them with you about how you can support community partners by re-envisioning that preparatory data work as an opportunity to identify gaps and provide resources for capacity building. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelsey. Nadine. Nadine.
Thank you. I'm just going to talk to you today about MLink, which is a community of practice that we've developed at Monash University in data linkage. And I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors, Diane Brown and Comathy. I'd like to acknowledge our traditional owners and elders past, present and emerging. Okay, so most of you here have probably heard about data linkage, but it's the bringing together of different data sets belonging to an individual, place or event from multiple data sources. And these generally involve routinely collected data of various types, with a lot of these data held by government. And in Australia, this makes data linkage particularly challenging because we're forced to work within a federated system. So that means each state has its own government that holds different data sets, and then the Commonwealth as a whole holds a whole new set of data. So if I as a researcher want to access hospital data for the nation, I need to go to each state individually, each of which has its own legislative requirements and its own governance processes. And then if I wanted to add, for example, Medicare data to that, I would need to go to the Commonwealth, which has its own set of legislative rules. This is made additionally challenging by the fact that we don't have a unique identifier in Australia, so it makes it a little harder to connect people together, particularly across jurisdictions. However, in the last particularly 5 years, the Australian government, through NCRIS and other initiatives, has invested significantly in the data linkage landscape. So they have made some governance changes. The most important of these is the Data Availability and Transparency Act, which came into being a couple of years ago, aimed at making data more available to researchers. They've also put a lot of effort into developing what we call integrated data assets. So these are where they bring similar data together in a single space and pre-link it using a data linkage spine or a national master linkage key. And this has helped us get over the issue of not having a unique identifier. However, there have been a number of challenges for researchers that have come with these rapid changes in infrastructure in the national landscape. So in particular, there's now multiple pathways that researchers can go through to access data. So for example, if I did want to access Medicare data, I could go via the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, I could go through the ONDC, I could go through the ABS, or I could approach a couple of states who now hold that data. We've also seen a proliferation in the creation of trusted research environments. And that has also meant that as a researcher, we're now often forced to work across multiple trees. So Monash University wanted to help their researchers to manage some of these complexities. And to Monash University, which is particularly important, it's a very data active university. It's Australia's largest university. And it supports a large number of clinical registries, clinical trials and cohort studies, many of which link to state and national data sets. So as part of this initiative, Monash asked us to set up a community of practice in data linkage and to set that up across all schools and faculties. So in 2019, we started with a working group of only 10 people. We tried to recruit as broadly as we could and to seek out people who had a range of skills so that we could encompass the full landscape. We developed a roadmap in our first few meetings. And from that roadmap, set ourselves a number of tasks. So we decided to make our working group a permanent thing. And most of the initial members are still part of the working group 6 years later. We then went out and did a recruitment drive. We went out through our networks, our university newsletters. We did a bit of a roadshow where we did a presentation on data linkage and how it could benefit various types of research. We generated a database called MLink, where we asked people who registered into our group to describe the types of research they did and the databases that they had experience with. And so that's created a resource where researchers can connect with other researchers who have potentially previously accessed the types of data that they're interested in. We developed some cheat sheets or quick guides into how to negotiate the landscape. We set up a few courses to provide introductory sessions to data linkage, and set up some events that we continue to run and have recently moved into advocacy and resourcing. Parallel to this, Monash University continued to invest in its own infrastructure, in particular its own trusted research environment. So this was really important because it enabled researchers to securely share data with each other. So while we were waiting sometimes 2 to 3 years to access data through government, it meant that we could share internal data sets fairly quickly to allow people to do some preliminary research or develop pilot data for their grants. The Monash also invested in some highly skilled people, particularly in the ethics and legal departments, to help with the growing number of data linkage projects that were being presented to their committees. And more recently, Monash has invested in Maverick, which is a high-powered computer system. So that will give us greater capacity in the future. It did come apparent, though, partway through our roadmap journey that just focusing internally was not going to be enough to support our researchers. So we then started to look externally. So as part of that work, we have worked with a number of NCRIS organisations to provide a researcher voice to some of the policies and documents being presented to government. We have also been providing a researcher voice to enable Monash to become accredited under the data scheme as an accredited data user. And that's going to be important for our capacity moving forward. And we've also been engaging externally for our events as they have grown. So this is where we are now. We've got around 150 members in our group. We've got people with a range of skill sets. We're still struggling with some of our faculties where we see we have value, but have had, I think because we had a strong health focus to start with, that has been a little more challenging, but we've got a strategy to address that. We've started to set up a library where people can deposit their publications to help fellow researchers with that. And we've also recently started with a GitHub to allow people to share code who are working on similar data sets. So these are some of our more recent major achievements. As I mentioned, assisting with accreditation for Monash under the data scheme. But at the end of last year, we actually co-hosted an event with 2 of our national NCRIS-funded organisations, the Population Health Research Network and the Australian Research Data Commons. And with that, we were able to get national heads of these organisations and heads of the various data linkage units to come to our institution to talk to our researchers about some of the challenges they were experiencing. And we actually ended up with 143 in-person attendees, which can be challenging at that smaller institutional level these days, given that most people want to do everything via Zoom. We ran some workshops to understand the challenges, both from a researcher and a data custodian perspective. Researchers in particular, it's around timely access to data, which hasn't actually improved with the increased infrastructure. The navigating multiple trees and the increasing costs that are associated with having additional infrastructure in a climate where it feels that the grant funding is becoming harder and harder to get. though it was really interesting hearing the custodian perspective. So, they've seen an exponential growth in demand, which has impacted on timelines. They have been struggling with getting a skilled workforce to meet the demand, and the increase in privacy risks, particularly the risks for data hacking, have become a major concern for them, which has led to, rightly, some more conservative approaches to their data. So in conclusion, initiatives like MLink have served as a crucial connector between researchers with other researchers to foster collaboration and support, between researchers and government, where we can provide a collective voice to help guide policy, and between researchers and the university, where we can drive those internal conversations that can help us in the meantime. So thank you, and finally I'd just like to acknowledge the current members of our working group.
Thank you. And the last one is we have Gabriela Pino Chacon, which is online. Gabriela, are you ready?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much.
I guess, yeah. Welcome.
If you can see my presentation?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you. Hi, my name is Gabriela Pino. I'm from Universidad Nacional in Costa Rica. And I'm making this presentation in behalf of Ricardo Castro, who could not accompany me today, and myself. First of all, I would like to begin by acknowledging and paying my respect to the Huetar people, creators of knowledge and traditional custodians of the land that sheltered me and Universidad Nacional at this time. Well, first, I want to begin with a brief, very brief contextualization of the case. For any institution, we know, but especially for institutions that work in the low and middle income countries, having update and relatable data is essential for responsible management and decision making. And this have to be done optimizing resources and at the same time maintaining the quality of fair data and promoting its democratization. To this end, Universidad Nacional has developed an open science strategy led by the Vice Rectory for Research, where I work, and Ricardo too, that rethought the experience from other countries to adapt the fundamental of open science to our reality. And so we arrived with 3 strategic pillars, and we hope sharing this experience can help other institutions with limited resources to achieve a lot with little, as we say. It's important that, and we just had a presentation, like two presentations before me, that in Latin America, we have been working a lot in achieving an open science strategic and open science practices to develop our research and our universities and institutions and countries. So in Latin America, all those building infrastructures and practices have served to support our implementation in Universidad Nacional. Things like the generalization of open access journals, the community-led non-APC and open science platform, such as Cielo, Amelica, La Referencia. There is progress in the harmonization of repositories standards and in the compatibility of protocols and so on. So we are not alone, and that's good. That's always good. And as you know, in Latin America, we have kind of good communication between us, especially between academia and between all the institutions that make research in Latin America. So going back to our strategy, the first pillar was, and is, by the way, the development of our data management capacity by creating an appropriate regulatory framework that already modified our conceptualization of results and data sharing. And that's quite good. That based on international trends. To do so, we need to engage with numerous, sorry, I didn't pass my slide. We have to engage a lot of stakeholders, from academia to the administrative functionaries, not only to coordinate efforts, but to be sure that we begin to speak the same language. And of course, we invest in new infrastructure that in our case was built as a network. At the same time, in our second pillar was the capacity building, the creating a capacity building on open science. What we did was to assess our strengths and needs. And with that, we developed the needs for the researchers, for the editors and librarians on the knowledge that they have to get to be able to promote open science and all the different dimensions of the open access, let's say constructing DMPs that we didn't do before. That is new for us. We began to do those 2 years ago, and to use database and data sets, the curation for librarians, for institutional repositories, strengthening the diamond pathway that we have, but strengthening that, implementing fair and care principles in the research. So we arrived to the our final pillar, that is the one that we are just implementing now. And we will ask you for some feedback on that. We designed a research portal with the support of DataSoft Business Group. Our university has made considerable progress on promoting open science over all the past decade that we built up the first two pillars of our strategy. However, greater efforts are required to standardize and streamline data availability, facilitating access to fair data for institutional decision-making. With this portal, we aim to make data available for informed decision-making, both for researchers and university authorities, and in the future for other stakeholders in society. We plan that the Open Research Data Portal, Portal Abierto de Datos de Investigación, as we call it in Spanish, or PADI, will support that our research data be well safe, available, and shareable, both nationally and internationally. Today, this portal have, as you see, 7 modules with information about what we do, how we organize our research and funded resources, relevant information about results and data. The idea is for this information to be interoperable and reusable using interactive data visualization tools and technologies for intuitive and relevant interaction with open data. PAT seeks to combine interoperable database, dynamic visualization capacities, and open access platforms. It's new for us. We have to build up capacities to manage this kind of platform, but it's a nice challenge for us. This infrastructure promises efficient and strategic data management, positioning UNA as a leader in the application of scientific knowledge to improve social well-being, reinforcing an institution that we always say that is we are the necessary university. And well, what we have is this link, this URL, to a form to ask you to feedback in that proposition and to feedback about your experiences building that kind of portals, that kind of a platform that is used to show what we do and to organize it for the decision making. And that's it. Thank you very much from Costa Rica. And I hope you will have a very nice end of the plenary. Thank you.
So thank you, Gabriela. Now we have a few minutes for question and answer and interaction. May I request the speakers to please take your seat. One of you bring your own chair, please. So, questions?
No questions.
Yeah, I have a question for Natasha. Actually, I heard your presentation on rates very well, but how are you tying up with, say, the LMICs or other countries like this? Is it at the governmental level, or you're open to go with institutional level?
Registration agencies you're talking about? Yeah, so we currently have got an open call to for anyone who wants to be able to either mint raids for the researchers at their institution or wants to be able to become a RAID registration agency where you then partner with the institutions and enable them to mint raids. So obviously we want to coordinate the registration agencies, and that's our role as the registration authority to make sure that there's not too much overlap and people are serving different constituencies. So does that answer your question? Yeah.
I also, if nobody has any other questions.
I might also add that some of the integrations mean that researchers can directly mint raids through some of the vendor integrations. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is for Soledad, but Rodrigo is here, so I'm going to ask you, Rodrigo. You show your approach from Chile. I know, because I've been discussing this with people from Argentina and Brazil, that one of the things that South America is pushing is the idea of using ARC instead of the OIs. What's your position about that? Or Chile's position about that?
We are actually a dataset consortium, so I think guess my answer. Okay. But I think, in general speaking, all pits are necessary. So it's ARC or it's DOIs or it's RED that I heard yesterday from Matthias over there. I think the proper use of them, it could make the information or the data more available, trustable, and so on. So I think it's not a matter of choice, but it's what it's in the deep knowledge is that you need to have pits in general. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other? People really waiting for the coffee, I think. So let's give a round of applause to our speakers. And thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.